You might remember that before the release of Tears of the Kingdom, this channel was making heavy inroads into becoming a Zelda-focused channel. I was shilling Tears of the Kingdom hard. I was not only promoting the game, I was promoting it to the demographic least likely to buy it. Much of my audience consisted of Zelda fans that didn't exactly like Breath of the Wild for one reason or another, and were skeptical about Tears of the Kingdom. So a month or two before release, I was doing nearly daily uploads. I was talking in podcasts with other very prominent Zelda YouTubers. And the plan was, once Tears of the Kingdom came out, I would cover it for a long while, and my content would transition into lore. I noticed that a huge number of the big Zelda content YouTubers were lore people, and I was eager to enter that space. That didn't happen. Post-release, my Zelda content tapered off. And I wasn't the only one. Go look at all of the big Zelda YouTubers. Not the ones focused on gameplay, the ones focused on lore. And you will find that they've only uploaded a handful of videos since the game came out. It released 10 months ago, and most of these large channels have well below 10 Tears of the Kingdom videos, less than one video a month. Yet, for the ones that were around, these same people were uploading more Breath of the Wild related videos at a higher rate for years after Breath of the Wild had already come out. There seems to be a general disinterest and disappointment, especially when it comes to the lore. There was a video by Hyrule Gamer called Are Zelda Games Losing Their Charm? And in the intro to that video, he talks about specifically the negativity and decline of interest that he's noticed. So the question is, why? Well, in a video by one of those big Zelda YouTubers, Bandit Games, he explains just that. In his video, he gives a lengthy explanation about why he's dissatisfied with Tears of the Kingdom, and why he's going to not make any more Tears of the Kingdom lore videos.
But what I mean is I haven't been theoretically sitting on my ass and not coming up with video ideas. I have video ideas. This isn't a video that's crying to people to give me video ideas. There are so many. It's an entire world. Okay, there are so many things to talk about in Tears of the Kingdom. What's this person's story? What's that person's story? Whatever. And we could explain lore all day long, but here's the thing. It's not that interesting anymore.
It's not that interesting. That's also the same reason why I didn't make a bunch of content post-release of Tears of the Kingdom. And I doubt we're unique. I suspect that that's the same reason that the post-launch lore videos from these channels is so sparse. It's because there's nothing to talk about, and what little there is to talk about is not very good. It's not that interesting. Before the game came out, many, if not most, of the lore videos that came out about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were lore videos that were trying to connect them to past Zelda games. Breath of the Wild, despite ostensibly separating itself from the other games in the timeline, still had a lot of references to those past games. The Temple of Time, the goddess statues, the fact that Zelda seems to describe previous versions of the hero. There's a lot in Breath of the Wild. There is a fertile ground that these lore theorists were happy to play in. And I do not believe that that fertility exists anymore. Tears of the Kingdom stamps it out. The new mythology doesn't care about the old mythology and supersedes it. So there's not a point in making videos that connect the two anymore, because it became increasingly clear that Nintendo doesn't want to connect the two. And they didn't have the old games or their established lore in mind when they were making this new one. Take the Master Sword, for example. Why does it get broken at the beginning of Tears of the Kingdom? How is Ganondorf so easily able to completely destroy it? Ganondorf is so strong in this game because he stole Sonia's secret stone in the past. And that secret stone, by itself, gave him this incredible power-up. So much of a power-up that he can defeat Rauru and all of the Guardians in Zelda, who also have their own secret stones. Defeats all of them. Even combined, they can't do anything against him. And this stone by itself makes him so strong that it just destroys the Master Sword immediately. What's bothersome about that lore detail is that the Master Sword isn't just some normal special sword. If we look at the previous mythology in A Link to the Past, we find out that the Master Sword was designed specifically to fight against Ganondorf when he got the Triforce. So Ganondorf got the Triforce, and the Triforce gave him a power-up, and the Master Sword was designed to counter that version of Ganondorf, the one that has a Triforce. What this means is that one secret stone, one measly secret stone, made Ganondorf stronger than the entire Triforce did at one point. That's ridiculous. The Triforce is the golden power, it's the ultimate power. It's the basis upon which the world is supposedly built. To have a single secret stone empower Ganondorf in a way that the full Triforce could not, can only mean that they weren't thinking about that kind of lore when they were making this story. The reason that the Master Sword got shattered so easily is because Nintendo didn't think of it, and they didn't care. Now, I suspect that you could think up of a reason why this might happen that wouldn't necessarily break the established canon. For example, an individual so inclined could speculate that the reason that the Master Sword broke was because in Tears of the Kingdom, it didn't take into account what Link did in Breath of the Wild. So the Master Sword that you have in Tears of the Kingdom is a version that didn't do the DLC. So it's not a fully completed Master Sword, it's just one that's like at the half damage that you can get without the DLC. And an explanation like that makes a little sense, it's kind of clever. But I don't believe that Nintendo would think of that. That's just secretly the reason in their heads and they're not saying anything about that. Zelda lore fans are always trying to twist themselves into knots to make the lore fit in ways that I don't think Nintendo intended it to fit. No, I don't believe that that's the reason or any reason like that. The real reason is because they didn't think of it, and I don't think they care. Now, personally, I don't mind if these new Zelda games separate themselves from previously established lore. You know, the old lore, it has a lot of accumulated history, and if they were going to be bound by what they had written previously, it would be difficult for them to come up with new stories. But one of the problems is that they're not really moving forward. They're still insisting on using references and allusions to their previous lore, and according to them, all those old games did still happen. So, for example, why is Ganondorf here at all? Why do they have this scene here where he's kneeling to the king and alluding to Ocarina of Time, like this is a retelling or something, when in this lore we know that Rauru is the founder of the Kingdom of Hyrule? So what's going on? What's happening here? Well, in an interview with Fujibayashi, the director for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, he posits a suggestion. It's not him telling us what happened, but he's like, oh, it could be this, you know? Maybe this is the thing. But it does seem like he's pointing to that being the right direction. And what he said is that it could be that the Kingdom of Hyrule was destroyed a long time ago and didn't exist for an undisclosed amount of time, and then at some point in history, Rauru came into the world, Azonai came into the world, and he established the Kingdom of Hyrule. And into this kingdom, Ganondorf was born, like for no reason. It's just Ganondorf again. It's literally Ganondorf. His name is Ganondorf, but it's been so long that nobody remembers anything from the previous games. Nobody knows who Ganondorf is or was. At this point, what's the difference between this? Oh, it's just been a long time and the kingdom got destroyed and then everybody was born back into it again. What's the difference between that and just starting over in a new continuity that isn't at all connected to previous events? I would prefer that than this. I suspect the real reason is simpler. They want to nostalgia bait us. They want us to go over to the Temple of Time and like, oh wow, it's the Temple of Time. They want us to find the ruins of Lon Lon Ranch and get emotional over them. They want those benefits of having an established timeline, an established lore, but they also don't want to be beholden to them. And look, I understand that. I understand that inclination. It makes sense that they would want to distance themselves from the lore of their past titles. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom deserve their own room to create their own mythology. But the thing is, this obsession of not being bound by the things they've done before extends even into these two games. It's not just about the past titles. They don't want Tears of the Kingdom to connect even to itself. It hesitates even to connect it to Breath of the Wild. So post Tears of the Kingdom's release, I made a joke video. I made a video pointing out that people are assuming that Link and Zelda are living together, But the people of Hateno Village, where Link supposedly lives, don't know him. They don't recognize him at all. People say nice to meet you, they introduce themselves to him. Nobody has ever seen him before. And that includes some surprising people, including the mayor of the village, the mayor's wife, who's the lady that's cleaning Zelda's house for her while she's gone, and the school children from the school that Zelda teaches in that go to her house every day after school. None of them know who you are. And that video is mostly a joke video. I don't really care whether or not Link and Zelda live in the same house. But it does point to a problem in the way that Tears of the Kingdom handles its continuity, its relationship to its previous game. It's not just about Link living in the house or not, it's about the quests that you could have done in Hateno Village. Like, Hateno Village is one of the important villages there, that's where Purah is. The game sends you there as part of the main quest line. But in Tears of the Kingdom, apparently, you never went there. You never did any of those quests. You never talked to any of these people. Including some that you really should have talked to, like Bolson, the guy who in Breath of the Wild sold you your house. You went to Hudson's wedding together in that game, and it's weird that he doesn't know you, because in Tears of the Kingdom you apparently still know Hudson. Apparently you still did the Tarrytown quest to build the village. You did still participate in that wedding, and you've known Hudson after that for years. It's like they selectively chose which parts of the quest were canon and which ones were removed. And then there's the Sheikah technology. The Sheikah technology all disappeared, and in Tears of the Kingdom that was never addressed. There was never any mention or hint as to why. And in a different interview with Fujibayashi, he explains why. According to him, they disappeared after the Calamity was defeated. All of the people of Hyrule also witnessed this, but there was no one who knows the mechanism or reason why they disappeared, and it is considered a mystery. It is believed that since the Calamity disappeared, they also disappeared as their role had been fulfilled. Here is the problem with that explanation. In Tears of the Kingdom's lore, we find out that Rauru sealed away Ganondorf. But apparently the seal wasn't perfect, some of his miasma was leaking out, and that is what Calamity Ganon seems to be. That's what we ended up calling Malice in Breath of the Wild. So this leaking out Malice builds up over the course of 10,000 years and then comes out as Calamity Ganon. The Sheikah noticed this pattern and created all this Sheikah technology to defeat Calamity Ganon. And the first time that they tried it, it worked. But what they defeated was just Calamity Ganon. Ganondorf was still sealed away, still leaking his malice. So it can't be that the Sheikah technology disappeared because their role was fulfilled, as Fujibayashi suggests, because the role hasn't been fulfilled. This is no different than the situation 10,000 years ago. They just defeated one more iteration of Calamity Ganon. There's no reason for it to disappear so completely. It would be one thing if it just went underground or something. But no, if you go to the Shrine of Resurrection, it's been stripped from the very walls. It's like it evaporated. If you were so inclined, you might be able to make an excuse for this that makes sense. You could, for example, assume that the Sheikah technology has a will of its own, it has some kind of consciousness, and it noticed that it was taken over by Calamity Ganon the last time it was used. And so to prevent that from happening again, it decided to self-destruct all over the place and evaporated by its own volition. Or you could assume that, again, it has some level of consciousness, and it noticed that the seal on Ganondorf was about to break, and its only purpose was to defeat Calamity Ganon, not actually fight Ganondorf. And that might be the reason why it disappeared. But again, I don't believe that that's secretly the reason, and Nintendo was just choosing to withhold that information for the sake of adding mystery to the game. If that was the case, they could have had an NPC, any NPC, drop a few lines of dialogue suggesting what Fujibayashi has said. But no, we didn't get it as part of in-game lore, we got it from an interview, which suggests to me that the real reason is that they didn't think of it and they don't care. I no longer trust that Nintendo is thinking about the lore that deeply. I think it's far more likely that Nintendo had the Sheikah civilization disappear simply because it was blue. Because it was an ancient civilization type thing with a blue aesthetic. And Nintendo needed to make room for their shiny new civilization with a green aesthetic. I think the real reason why nobody in Hateno Village remembers Link, even though he supposedly lives there, is because as much as possible they don't want newcomers into Tears of the Kingdom from Breath of the Wild to feel out of place. They don't want a situation where every NPC recognizes Link, and these new players to feel like they're missing out on a bunch of context. So they just made a situation in which, in this game, Link didn't go to certain places, he didn't talk to certain people, he didn't do certain quests, and even the things that he did do, like the Hudson wedding, happened in a different way because apparently he never talked to Bolson during that interaction. The answer to why all of these inconsistencies are happening seems to me to be because the story needed it to happen, and no other reason past that. They didn't think of it, and they don't care. And if they don't, I don't see the reason why I should. It's clear that they don't want to connect these new Zelda games to their older titles in any way other than a superficial reference. And they don't even care about the lore that they are generating for these new Zeldas. They'll get rid of it the moment it becomes inconvenient. And even the lore that they generated for these games that they keep is not very good. So for example, you have the 8 Heroines mystery. In Breath of the Wild, that was one of the more interesting mysteries. There was a lot of speculation about it. Initially, people were trying to tie them to ancient sages, and then as more information on Tears of the Kingdom came out, they tried to tie them to the people that wielded the secret stones in the past, assuming that they paralleled the sages from Ocarina of Time. This is the kind of lore that was very interesting. Monster Maze, a YouTuber, had a lengthy video on the subject, presenting all the existing evidence and going through a pretty cool theory. Well, in Tears of the Kingdom, we did finally get an answer to that mystery. And the answer was lame. The 8th heroine was just some guy. It had nothing to do with anything, and I think that this perfectly encapsulates the problem. They were unwilling to have the heroines parallel the sages, even though every piece of evidence that they had put so far seemed to point to that. But they were also unwilling to tie it to their new mythology. They were unwilling to tie it to the champions or the secret stones. They are determined to have their lore and mythology go nowhere and mean nothing. You can't extrapolate anything from it because there isn't anything there. It is not a surprise that there are so few lore videos about Tears of the Kingdom, because if Nintendo isn't going to take their lore seriously, then many people are going to see that and become discouraged. It makes people think that they've been writing conspiratorial fanfiction that's been trying to make sense of something that fundamentally doesn't make any. And that's the end of this video. Please unsubscribe and unclick the bell notification. And as always, thank you very much for watching.